I agree with State that this is the first United States president who's actually spent part of his childhood in an ASEAN country. But more than that, you may not know that his half-sister Maya, who's half Indonesian, is married to a Malaysian, Conrad Ng, who had emigrated to Canada from Sabah. So there is this family history. But then, relations between states are governed by interest and not by sentiment. Sentiment helps, of course. So let's look at some of the facts of US-ASEAN relations. 1. The United States has a very substantial cumulative FDI in ASEAN, one of the highest in the world. And according to the United States Department of Commerce, US investment in ASEAN earns the highest return compared to US investment in any other region of the world. Second, United States trade with ASEAN is huge and it's growing rapidly. I think according to one calculation, we may be the third largest export market for the United States. Something like that. I don't remember the number. Third or fourth. Number 4. Southeast Asia is a region of 550 million people. It's not as big as China and India, but it's quite substantial, And if we succeed in our aspiration to create out of 10 disparate economy, one single market and production platform by 2015, we would be a considerable economic force in the world, and one that's friendly to the United States. We also are located strategically bestride some of the most important sea lanes in the world. The Straits of Malacca in Singapore, which is the most used international strait in the world, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait. So these are very important facts. Finally, the United States should and will, I'm sure, appreciate the important role that ASEAN plays in organizing relations between and among all the Asian players. Given the history of mistrust existing between Japan and China, Japan and Korea, China and India, ASEAN is the only country in the whole of Asia that can convene a meeting bringing all the Asian players together. We are neutral, we are non-threatening, we are acceptable. This is why ASEAN is the convener and is in the driver's seat in ASEAN Plus 3, in the East Asia Summit, in the ASEAN regional forums. And I think to the extent that ASEAN helps to maintain comity and cooperation in Asia, this is in the interest of the United States.
I was just wondering, I think one of the things that the current situation would perhaps advise us to be a bit more sensitive to is that it is true, I think, Professor Koh, that obviously interests always matter. So, I haven't had a chance to read this whole report, but I gather that it's primarily focused on economics, politics, and law. I'm just wondering, meaning all these things associated with them. But I'm thinking whether the three things that to me seem to be currently quite important as well might also be brought into discussion. Over the last 3 days, we have been having women from about 15 countries meeting at SMU in terms of economic opportunities for the future. So the World Bank sponsored this project with the Stern School of Business and us partnering. One of the things that came through was the important role of women that now seems to be surfacing as a very powerful, perhaps, hope in terms of, the world becoming a more stable kind of thing. And Claire Chang was talking that if communism has failed, capitalism, or it's kind of free capitalism has failed, or seems to be failing in some ways, then we need to talk about moral capitalism, those kinds of things. So that's one. 2 is I'm wondering if the panel has some thoughts about the role of youth in all of this, because it seems to me to be older people's talk, a lot of this, and I'm wondering whether the youth that sometimes transcend these kind of barriers may also be important in this. And the third is, what do you see as the role of the new technology in terms of America's role in Asia? Thank you.
In the section I wrote on U.S. relations with Southeast Asia, I did appeal to the United States to do several things. One, to give priority to supporting education in the region. And I'm so pleased that President Obama has announced a global education initiative. I feel that that the United States can help many developing countries, not just in Southeast Asia, but in South Asia, in the Middle East and elsewhere, to provide every child with an opportunity to have a good education. In many countries in the Muslim world, they go to madrasa because the alternative is not available. So I think we want to provide education to every child. Another recommendation I made in my report is that the United States should support the empowerment of women. And I felt that one of the most important ways to fight fundamentalism is to support the empowerment of women. So I hope that an appropriate. So I'm afraid that Raja, I can't agree with you that if I were the United States, I would be prepared to say to the Taliban, you can do whatever you want to your women as long as you don't attack the American. I think given the nature of the American democracy, no American can convey such a message to the Taliban. I don't know whether I'm right.
Quick comment on the role of women. I think it's vitally important, and I'm never going to say anything else like that with Secretary Clinton about to arrive in the region. Except for if things had been a little bit different, she would be president of the United States. So that I think the United States has been lagging behind ASEAN in terms of having women in the top government positions, but I think the trend is toward a greater role for them. And I believe the statistics in the United States are showing, with our rising unemployment, that women are actually becoming a bigger part of the workforce in the United States than men now, because more men are being laid off. So that the role of women, I think, is deservedly getting attention. The role of youth, people like to speak about the hope of the youth, in the future, et cetera, like that. That's not the way it is in the United States. The youth are the victims of a generation of adults who is passing on our refusal to pay the current costs of our standard of living and bear them ourselves. It's an outrage. Every time people say, cut taxes, etc., they're saying tax our children. That's essentially what they're saying, because we have so many unfunded mandates in the United States that essentially the burden is going to go on the children. So I'm angry as an American that we are engaging in slogans. We're the first generation that I can remember which is going to pass on burdens to our children that we should have been bearing ourselves. And it's an outrage. On the role of new technology in terms of the U.S. role in Asia, I think this is a very important area. It's an area where the United States still has a significant competitive edge over most of the rest of the world. I think the future of the U.S. economy in many ways is in a knowledge-based, high-tech economy. We shouldn't try to compete in textiles and areas like this, but in the area we have the best tertiary educational system in the world by far. It may change over time, but at the moment it's our ability to translate that into a competitive edge in new technology, which I think has enormous potential for the United States, and that could be very beneficial for this part of the world because much of our production of new technology has been based in this region.
I think the technology is also key in dealing with global warming. I don't think you're never going to have 180 countries sitting around a table and solving problems. You'll have it when the US and a few others, say maybe China, Japan, can sit together and say, look, here is a new technology. We're working on it, we produce into the market. That is going to change the dynamics. So therefore, investing in technology is going to be the key. And my sense is the US would be the leader for quite some time to come.
I'm afraid we've come to the close of our session. When Ambassador Roy and Ambassador Armacost, Ambassador Ko, Dr. Mohan, and Ambassador Han in Korea, when we began to formulate this project, the one thing we wanted to make sure was that this report had relevance. And I believe we accomplished that. In discussing U.S.-Southeast Asian relations today, Southeast Asia might not have the major strategic challenges of the Taiwan Strait or difficulties on the Korean Peninsula or the tension between India and Pakistan and what's going on in Afghanistan. But nonetheless, the United States' interests in Southeast Asia are permanent and they're not passing. I think at a time where we're facing global economic difficulty, it's easy for countries, whether it's the United States or Singapore, Indonesia, or elsewhere in the region, to look inward. But I think with Secretary of State Clinton's visit to Indonesia tomorrow, perhaps laying the way for President Obama to visit Indonesia sooner rather than later, and to make a major public address to the Islamic community throughout the world. Mrs. Clinton promising to attend DARF meetings, so therefore we'll be going to Thailand, and the APEC meeting later this year in Singapore, I think will show a significant interest that the United States has in Southeast Asia, and a growing interest, though it's also in relation to other foreign policy challenges the United States faces around the world. Ambassador Ko talked about ASEAN being in the driver's seat. I just wanted to comment to that, and with ASEAN being sort of at the center of regional institutions such as APEC, ARF, the East Asian Summit, I think it's also important for ASEAN to be a driving force. And I think if, as I said, the report articulates Southeast Asia's relevance to the United States, as I believe it does for the other regions, and hopefully if that our foreign policy makers on both sides of the Pacific heed the findings and recommendations found in the report. And with that, I'd like to thank Ambassador Roy, Ambassador Ko, Dr. Mohan, and the Institute for Policy Studies for allowing us to hold this session today. And thank you for your thoughtful questions.